The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast their familiar pale glow across the linoleum floors as Sarah Chin pushed through the double doors of the cardiac wing. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday, the beginning of another 12-hour shift. She'd been a registered nurse for 3 years now, and while the work was exhausting, it was also the only thing that made her feel truly alive. "Sarah, we've got a new admission in 304, called out Helen, the charge nurse, a veteran with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen everything. Motorcycle accident. Marcus Reed, 32 years old. Fractured ribs, concussion, some road rash. He's stable but in considerable pain." Sarah nodded, grabbing the chart from the nurse's station. She scanned the details quickly, no family listed as present, emergency contact was a brother in Seattle. As she approached room 304, she took a deep breath, composing herself into the calm, professional demeanor that patients needed to see. She knocked softly and entered. The man in the bed was not what she expected. Despite the bruises blooming purple and yellow across his jaw and cheekbone, despite the white bandages wrapped around his torso and the 4 lines snaking into his arm, there was something striking about him. Dark hair fell across his forehead in messy waves, and when he turned to look at her, his eyes, a deep brown that caught the light, were alert and surprisingly warm. "You must be my guardian angel," he said, his voice rough with pain but carrying a hint of humor that surprised her. Sarah felt an unexpected flutter in her chest, but she pushed it aside. She'd learned early in nursing school not to get emotionally involved with patients. Compassion, yes. Care, absolutely. But this feeling, this sudden awareness of him as more than just a patient, was dangerous. "I'm Sarah, your night nurse," she said, keeping her voice professional and kind. "I'm going to check your vitals and make sure you're comfortable. How's your pain level right now, on a scale of 1 to 10? "About a 7, Marcus admitted, trying to shift and wincing. "But it's manageable." "You don't have to be tough," Sarah said gently, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around his arm. "That's what the pain medication is for. There's no prize for suffering." He laughed, then grimaced. "Laughing definitely not recommended." Noted. As she worked, checking his blood pressure, temperature, and oxygen levels, Sarah was acutely aware of his gaze on her. Most patients were either too medicated or too focused on their own discomfort to really notice their nurses, but Marcus was different. He watched her with an intensity that was both unnerving and oddly flattering. "So, how bad is it really?" he asked as she made notes on his chart. "The doctor this afternoon gave me the medical version, all jargon and statistics. I want the real story." Sarah met his eyes. Honesty was important. "You'll recover fully, but it's going to take time. Those fractured ribs need at least 6 weeks to heal completely. You'll be here in the hospital for about a week, maybe less if you progress well. The concussion was mild, but we need to monitor you. No driving for a while, no strenuous activity, and definitely no motorcycles for at least 2 months. 2 months without riding?" Marcus groaned. "That might be worse than the broken ribs." "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Reed. According to the paramedics' report, if you hadn't been wearing a helmet, we wouldn't be having this conversation." "Marcus," he corrected softly. "Please. Mr. Reed is my father, and I'd rather not think about him right now." There was something in his tone, a hint of complicated family dynamics, that made Sarah curious. But it wasn't her place to pry. "Okay, Marcus. I'll be checking on you throughout the night. If you need anything, pain medication, water, extra blankets, anything at all, just press the call button. Will you be the one who comes?" "If I'm available, yes. But there are other nurses on duty too." "I hope it's you," he said simply. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. She mumbled something about needing to check on other patients and hurried out of the room, her heart beating faster than it should. This, she told herself firmly, was exactly the kind of complication she didn't need. But complications, Sarah discovered over the next several nights, had a way of ignoring what she needed or didn't need. Marcus's call button lit up around 2 a.m. that first night. Sarah responded, expecting a request for pain medication or help getting to the bathroom. The usual needs of recovering patients. Instead, she found him sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the city lights below. "Everything okay?" she asked softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, and in the dim light of the room, she saw something raw in his expression. "I can't sleep. The pain medication makes me drowsy, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that highway, seeing the car swerve into my lane, feeling the impact. It's like it's happening over and over." Sarah had seen this before. The psychological aftermath of trauma could be as debilitating as physical injuries. She should have offered to page the on-call psychiatrist, suggested relaxation techniques, been professionally supportive but emotionally distant. Instead, she pulled up a chair beside his bed. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. And Marcus did. He told her about the accident in detail. The way time seemed to slow down, the certainty that he was going to die, the strange clarity that came with that certainty. He talked about the things that flashed through his mind in those seconds: his mother, who'd died from cancer 5 years ago, his strained relationship with his father, a corporate attorney who'd never understood Marcus's decision to become an architect instead of following in his footsteps. His brother James, who lived across the country and whom Marcus hadn't spoken to in 6 months over some stupid argument he couldn't even remember now. "It's funny," Marcus said, his voice quiet in the darkness. "You spend your whole life building walls, protecting yourself, keeping certain people at arm's length because it's easier that way. And then in one moment, you realize that all those walls, all that protection, it doesn't mean anything. Because you're mortal, and life is so damn fragile, and the only thing that matters is connection. Real, honest, vulnerable connection." Sarah found herself sharing things she rarely spoke about, her own brush with mortality through her younger brother Daniel's leukemia diagnosis when she was 15 and he was only 8. She told Marcus about the endless months in hospitals, the fear that permeated every moment, the way her parents aged years and weeks. She spoke about the nurses who had been their anchors, who had shown such incredible compassion and strength that Sarah had known, even then, what her calling was. "Daniel's 21 now," she said, a smile in her voice. "He's studying environmental science and planning to save the world, one endangered species at a time. Those nurses, they didn't just save him, they saved my whole family. They gave us hope when we had none." Marcus reached out slowly, and Sarah found her hand in his. His grip was warm and steady despite his injuries. "That's why you do this," he said. It wasn't a question. "That's why I do this," she confirmed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked, until Marcus's breathing deepened and he finally fell into a natural sleep. Sarah carefully extracted her hand and tucked the blanket around him before slipping out of the room. Helen was at the nurse's station when Sarah returned, her experienced eyes missing nothing. "Room 304? She asked knowingly. "He was having trouble sleeping. Post-traumatic stress." Helen's tone was gentle but pointed. "Sarah, in 30 years, I've seen a lot of nurses develop feelings for their patients. It's natural, we see people at their most vulnerable, we care for them intimately, bonds form. But those bonds, they're not the same as real relationships. They're intense but temporary, built on circumstances that won't exist once they walk out those doors." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I know that." But even as she said it, she wondered if she really did. The next day was Sarah's day off, but she found herself thinking about Marcus constantly. She tried to distract herself. She went for a run, met her best friend Rachel for lunch, attempted to read a novel that had been sitting on her nightstand for months. Nothing worked. Her mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to room 304, to the man with the bruised face and the honest eyes. "You're not even listening to me," Rachel said, waving a hand in front of Sarah's face. They were sitting in a small Vietnamese restaurant, bowls of pho steaming between them. "Sorry," Sarah said, snapping back to attention. "What were you saying?" I was talking about my disastrous Tinder date, but clearly something else has your attention. What's going on? You've been distracted all day. Sarah hesitated, then found herself telling Rachel about Marcus. Her friend listened with growing interest, her eyes widening. Wait, so you're falling for a patient? Rachel said. Sarah, that's so not like you. You're always the responsible one, the one who follows the rules. I'm not falling for him, Sarah protested weakly. We had a really good conversation, that's all. He's interesting. Interesting enough that you can't stop thinking about him on your day off. Sarah, honey, that's not just interest. That's the beginning of something. Which is exactly why it can't happen, Sarah said firmly. It's unethical. He's vulnerable, I'm in a position of power. Even if there was something there, acting on it would be wrong. But after he's discharged? Rachel pressed. Once he's not your patient anymore? Sarah didn't answer, because she didn't have an answer. The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. When she returned to work the following night, Sarah told herself she would maintain proper boundaries. She would be professional, kind, but distant. She would not spend unnecessary time in room 304. Those resolutions lasted approximately 20 minutes. Marcus's face lit up when she entered for her initial check. You're back. I was hoping you would be. Yesterday's nurse was perfectly nice, but she wasn't you. How are you feeling today? Sarah asked, keeping her tone neutral as she checked his chart. I see your pain levels have been decreasing. Much better, physically at least. Mentally, I've been going a bit crazy with boredom. There's only so much bad daytime TV a person can watch. Have you had any visitors? Sarah asked, noting that his emergency contact still hadn't arrived. Marcus's expression clouded. My brother's flight got delayed, he'll be here tomorrow. My father, well, let's just say we're not on speaking terms. And most of my friends work insane hours at their firms. I told them not to bother coming until I'm out of here. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy. Hospitals could be incredibly lonely places, especially at night. I could bring you some books from the hospital library, if you'd like. We have a surprisingly good collection. You'd do that? Of course. What do you like to read? That simple question opened a floodgate. Marcus talked about his love of architecture books and biographies, his guilty pleasure for science fiction, his attempt to read all of Hemingway that had stalled halfway through For Whom the Bell Tolls. Sarah shared her own reading habits, mysteries and thrillers that she read on her commute, literary fiction that made her think, the poetry collection that had gotten her through nursing school. Over the next few days, their conversations deepened. Sarah found herself bringing him books, downloading podcasts she thought he'd enjoy, spending her breaks in his room when she should have been resting in the break room. They talked about everything, his dreams of designing sustainable buildings that could change how people lived, her secret ambition to someday work with Doctors Without Borders, their shared love of old movies and Thai food and the ocean at dawn. Marcus told her about his mother, a gentle woman who had encouraged his creativity and who had died too young. He spoke about the rift with his father that had started long before her death but had become unbridgeable afterward. He confessed his fear that he was wasting his life, that at 32 he should have accomplished more, meant more, made more of a difference. Sarah shared her own insecurities. That she sometimes felt like she was playing it too safe, that she dreamed of adventure and making a bigger impact but was terrified of leaving the security of what she knew. She told him about the guilt she carried over Daniel's illness, the irrational but persistent feeling that if she'd been a better sister, somehow he wouldn't have gotten sick. That's not how leukemia works, Marcus said gently. You know that, right? You were a kid. It wasn't your fault. Knowing something intellectually and believing it emotionally are two different things, Sarah replied. I get that. I know intellectually that my mother's death wasn't my fault either, that cancer doesn't care how much you love someone. But I still carry the regret of every moment I was too busy to visit, Every phone call I cut short because I had a deadline. They sat with that shared understanding, the particular pain of loving someone you've lost. On the 5th day, Sarah arrived for her shift to find Helen waiting for her with a serious expression. "Sarah, we need to talk about room 304, she said, leading Sarah into the small office behind the nurse's station. Sarah's stomach dropped. "I know. I've been spending too much time." "That's not what concerns me," Helen interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "What concerns me is the way you look at each other. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I know what I'm seeing. You're falling in love with him. Maybe you already have." Sarah opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found tears pricking at her eyes. "I don't know how it happened. I tried to keep it professional. I tried to maintain boundaries. But Helen, when I'm with him, I feel like I'm the best version of myself. He sees me in a way no one else does. We connect on this level that I've never experienced before." Helen sighed and sat down, gesturing for Sarah to do the same. "I'm not going to report you or tell you that you've done anything wrong, because you haven't. You've provided excellent care. But I need you to understand something. What you're feeling, what he's feeling, it's complicated by circumstances. He's in a vulnerable position. You're in a position of power. And the intensity of a hospital environment, the way it strips away all the normal social pretenses, it creates a kind of hothouse effect. Feelings develop faster and stronger than they would in the real world." "So you're saying it's not real?" "I'm saying you won't know if it's real until he leaves here and you both have perspective. Some patient-nurse relationships do turn into real, lasting love. I've seen it happen. But I've also seen nurses get their hearts broken when patients who seem devoted never call after discharge, or when the connection that felt so powerful in the hospital fizzles in the real world. What should I do? Be honest with yourself about what you're feeling. Be honest with him when the time is right. But protect yourself too. And remember, until he's discharged, he's still your patient, and that comes first." That night, Sarah approached room 304 with a mix of anticipation and dread. She needed to talk to Marcus, to understand what this was between them, to know if she was alone in these feelings or if he felt it too. But when she entered, she found Marcus asleep, his face peaceful in repose. On the bedside table was a folded piece of paper with her name on it. Sarah picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. Inside, in Marcus's angular handwriting, was a letter. "Sarah," it began. "I don't know if I'll have the courage to say this to your face, so I'm writing it down. From the moment you walked into this room, something in my world shifted. At first, I thought it was just gratitude. Of course I'm grateful for your care, your kindness, your competence. But it's more than that. You've made this week, which should have been one of the worst of my life, into something precious. Every conversation we have, I discover something new about you that fascinates me. Your laugh, your thoughtfulness, the way you really listen when people talk, the passion in your voice when you speak about helping people, all of it draws me in. I know the situation is complicated. I know I'm your patient and there are rules and ethics to consider. I know that what we feel in this place, in this liminal space between injury and healing, might not translate to the real world. But I also know that I can't let you walk out of my life without at least trying to find out if this is real. I'm being discharged tomorrow. Once I'm no longer your patient, would you consider having coffee with me? Or dinner? Or just a conversation that isn't bound by these hospital walls? No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance to see if what we found here can exist out there too. If the answer is no, I'll understand. You've already given me so much. Hope, connection, a reminder of what matters in life. Whatever you decide, thank you for being my guardian angel. Marcus." Sarah read the letter 3 times, her heart racing. She looked at Marcus's sleeping form, at the bandages that were now smaller, at the bruises that had faded from purple to yellow-green. He was healing. Soon he would leave. And she would have to decide if she was brave enough to take this chance. She pulled out a pen and wrote her response on the back of his letter, then folded it and tucked it into his hand. Morning came too quickly. Sarah's shift was ending just as Dr. Morrison was making rounds, signing discharge papers for patients who were ready to leave. Marcus was one of them. Sarah busied herself with other patients, trying not to think about the fact that she might never see him again. But as 7 a.m. approached, she found herself drawn back to room 304. Marcus was dressed in regular clothes for the first time, jeans and a soft blue t-shirt that made his eyes even more striking. He was carefully packing the few belongings he'd accumulated during his stay, moving gingerly to protect his still healing ribs. He looked up when she entered, and his expression was nervous, hopeful, vulnerable. "Did you find my letter?" he asked quietly. "I did." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "And?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would define everything that came next. She could play it safe, could thank him politely and wish him well and let him walk out of her life. It would be the sensible thing to do, the protected thing. But Sarah had spent 3 years watching people fight for their lives, seeing them cling to every moment, every connection, every chance at happiness. She'd learned that life was fragile and precious and far too short for cowardice. "There's a coffee shop across the street from the hospital," she said. "A little place called the Daily Grind. I get off shift in 20 minutes. If you happen to be there around 7:30, I'd very much like to have coffee with you. As two people, not as nurse and patient." The smile that spread across Marcus's face was radiant, transforming his still bruised features into something beautiful. "I'll be there," he promised. The official discharge took another 30 minutes. Sarah wasn't allowed to be part of it. Hospital policy meant that Marcus's daytime nurse, Jennifer, handled the final instructions and paperwork. Sarah watched from a distance as Marcus was wheeled to the exit in the mandatory wheelchair, as he stood and walked out through the sliding doors into the morning sunlight. The moment he was gone, the hospital felt emptier somehow. Sarah finished her shift notes, changed out of her scrubs into jeans and a soft green sweater, and made her way across the street with butterflies rioting in her stomach. What if he'd changed his mind? What if the magic of the hospital didn't translate to the real world? What if he was there, sitting at a small table by the window, 2 cups of coffee already waiting? When he saw her, he stood carefully, his smile uncertain but genuine. "You came," he said. "I came," Sarah confirmed, sliding into the chair across from him. For a moment, they just looked at each other, adjusting to this new context. Marcus without a hospital gown and 4 lines. Sarah without her scrubs and professional demeanor. Just 2 people in a coffee shop on a Friday morning. "This is weird, right?" Marcus said with a nervous laugh. "I mean, good weird. But weird." "Definitely weird," Sarah agreed. "I've never dated a patient before. I've never even been tempted to." "So this is a date?" Marcus's eyes lit up. "I don't know what this is," Sarah admitted. "But I wanted to find out." They talked for 2 hours, until Sarah was so exhausted from her night shift that she was swaying in her seat. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering new layers to each other now that they were free from the confines of room 304. The connection was still there. If anything, it felt stronger without the hospital's fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. "You need to sleep," Marcus said finally, noticing her fatigue. "But before you go, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Can I see you again? Dinner, maybe? When you're not working and I'm not barely able to walk." Sarah felt a smile spread across her face, genuine and unguarded. "I'd really like that." They exchanged phone numbers, made tentative plans for dinner the following week, and said goodbye with a hug that was careful of Marcus's ribs but warm with promise. As Sarah drove home, the sunrise painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, she felt a bubbling sense of possibility. She'd taken a risk. She'd chosen courage over caution. and whatever happened next, she knew she wouldn't regret it. The dinner the following week became a regular occurrence. Then twice a week. Then whenever their schedules aligned, which was often. Sarah and Marcus fell into each other's lives with a naturalness that surprised them both. They discovered they were compatible in ways they hadn't expected. Marcus, despite his creative profession, was organized and methodical. He helped Sarah set up a filing system for her medical journals and continuing education materials. Sarah, despite her structured work life, was spontaneous and adventurous. She convinced Marcus to try rock climbing, carefully, with his doctor's approval, and took him to an underground jazz club she'd discovered. They met each other's important people. Sarah introduced Marcus to Rachel, who pulled her aside afterward and said, "Okay, I take back every word of caution. That man is completely in love with you." Marcus introduced Sarah to his brother James, who flew in for a weekend and told Marcus privately, "I've never seen you this happy. Don't screw this up." The relationship wasn't without challenges. Sarah's 12-hour shifts meant that their schedules often conflicted. Marcus's work sometimes required long hours and intense focus. They had their first real fight when Marcus forgot to call Sarah before a risky consultation that involved climbing scaffolding at a construction site just 6 weeks after his accident. "You could have been hurt again," Sarah had said, her fear manifesting as anger. "You promised you'd be careful." "I was careful," Marcus protested. "I'm not made of glass, Sarah. I can't live my life being afraid of everything." "I'm not asking you to be afraid. I'm asking you to be smart. To remember that there are people who care about you, who would be devastated if something happened to you." They'd stared at each other, both breathing hard, before Marcus's expression softened. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should have called. I should have thought about how you'd feel. I'm sorry." That fight taught them both something important about communication and consideration, about the way love meant thinking about how your actions affected the people who cared about you. 3 months into their relationship, Marcus finally introduced Sarah to his father. Richard Reed was a tall, stern man in his early 60s, impeccably dressed and imposing. The dinner was tense at first, with Richard asking Sarah probing questions about her background and career. "Nursing is admirable work," Richard said in a tone that suggested he found it anything but. "Though I imagine the pay isn't particularly lucrative." "Dad," Marcus said warningly. But Sarah met Richard's eyes steadily. "I didn't become a nurse for the money, Mr. Reed. I became a nurse because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives at their most vulnerable moments. Your son understands that kind of calling. He talks about architecture the same way I talk about nursing. As something meaningful, something that matters beyond just a paycheck." For the first time that evening, Richard's expression shifted, showing something like respect. "Marcus did mention that you two met at the hospital. After his accident." "I was his nurse," Sarah confirmed. "And I'm not going to pretend that didn't complicate things. But we waited until after he was discharged. We did things the right way." The dinner didn't end with Richard giving his blessing or welcoming Sarah with open arms. But it ended with a handshake and a gruff, "I'd like to hear more about this Doctors Without Borders ambition of yours," that felt like progress. On the drive home, Marcus took Sarah's hand. "Thank you for that. For standing up to him, for being yourself. He doesn't warm up to people easily, but I could tell he was impressed." "Does it matter to you? His approval?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Yes and no. I don't need his approval to be with you. I'd choose you regardless. But having it would make things easier. And I think I'd like to repair our relationship, if possible. Life's too short for unnecessary estrangement." Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding completely. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah and Marcus had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They'd exchanged keys to their respective apartments. They spent most nights together, though they maintained separate spaces out of practicality rather than any lack of commitment. Their friends joked that they were an old married couple already, finishing each other's sentences and communicating with just a glance. But there was one conversation they'd been avoiding, one topic that hung unspoken between them. Finally, one evening as they sat on Marcus's balcony watching the sunset, Sarah brought it up. "I've been thinking about Doctors Without Borders again," she said quietly. Marcus went very still. "Yeah? There's an information session next month. A recruiter is coming to talk about current placements and what they're looking for in volunteers." Sarah took a breath. "I want to go. Not to commit to anything yet, but to learn more, to understand if it's really something I could do." "Of course you should go," Marcus said immediately. "This has been your dream for years. You'd regret it forever if you didn't at least explore it." "But Marcus, if I do this, if I actually apply and get accepted, it would mean leaving for 6 months to a year. Maybe longer. It would mean being apart, being in potentially dangerous situations, having limited communication." "I know. And you'd be okay with that?" Marcus turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "Sarah, I'm not going to lie and say I'd love being apart from you. I wouldn't. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. But I also know that part of why I love you is because you're the kind of person who wants to make a difference, who wants to serve something bigger than herself. If I tried to hold you back from that, if I made you choose between your dreams and our relationship, I'd be the wrong man for you." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "What if we don't survive the distance? What if? Then we'll deal with that if it happens." "But Sarah, you said it yourself when we first met, life is fragile. We only get one chance at this. And the regret of not trying, of not pursuing what matters to you, that would poison us eventually. I'd rather take the risk of distance than watch you sacrifice your dreams for me." Sarah kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. The information session led to an application, which led to interviews, which led to a placement offer. Sarah would be going to a refugee camp in Uganda for 9 months, working with displaced populations who desperately needed medical care. The night before she left, Sarah and Marcus had dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first real date. They talked about the logistics, the video calls they'd schedule, the emails they'd exchange, the care packages Marcus promised to send. But they also talked about something deeper. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Sarah's heart stuttered. "This isn't what you think it is." "Not yet. But I wanted you to have this." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant, a pair of wings, beautifully crafted. "My guardian angel," Marcus said softly. "I had it custom made. When you're over there, doing your incredible work, I want you to remember that I'm here, believing in you, loving you, waiting for you." Sarah put on the necklace with trembling hands. 9 months, she whispered. 9 months, Marcus agreed. "We can do 9 months. And then we'll figure out the rest of our lives together." 13 months later, Sarah stood at the arrivals gate of the international terminal, her heart pounding with anticipation. She'd been back in the country for only 3 hours, having caught the earliest flight she could after finishing her extended assignment in Uganda. She scanned the crowd, looking for Marcus's familiar face. And then she saw him, and her breath caught. He looked good. Healthy, happy, his hair slightly longer than she remembered. He was holding a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal, and suddenly Sarah was running, ignoring her exhaustion, ignoring the heavy backpack, ignoring everything except the need to be in his arms. Marcus caught her, lifting her off her feet despite the startled protest of his long-heeled ribs, and they were kissing and laughing and crying all at once. "You're early," Marcus said when they finally broke apart, his hands framing her face as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You weren't supposed to be back for another week." "I couldn't wait," Sarah said. "I finished my last clinic day and got the first flight out." "Marcus, I have so much to tell you." "Later," he interrupted gently. "We have time. We have all the time in the world." Right now, I just want to look at you. They stood there in the middle of the terminal, travelers flowing around them like water around stones, just holding each other. Finally, Marcus pulled back slightly. Before we go anywhere, before we do anything else, I need to ask you something. And there, in the arrivals terminal of the airport, Marcus got down on one knee. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Sarah Chen, you are the bravest, most compassionate, most incredible person I've ever known. You saved my life, not just in that hospital room but every day since. These past months apart have been the hardest of my life, but they've also shown me with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Wherever that takes us, whatever challenges we face, I want to face them together. Will you marry me? Through her tears, Sarah could only nod at first. Then, finding her voice, yes. Yes, absolutely yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. A simple band with a single diamond that caught the light, and stood to kiss her again as the people around them broke into spontaneous applause. I love you, Sarah whispered against his lips. I love you so much. I love you too, my guardian angel. As they walked out of the airport together, hand in hand, Sarah felt the weight of the pendant against her chest, the wings Marcus had given her before she left. She'd worn it every day in Uganda, through difficult clinics and challenging moments, a reminder of the love waiting for her back home. Now, heading toward a future they'd build together, she realized that sometimes the best healing doesn't happen in hospital rooms or refugee camps. Sometimes it happens in the brave decision to open your heart, to take risks, to believe that love is worth fighting for. And sometimes, just sometimes, guardian angels come in the form of motorcycle accident victims who make you laugh at 2 a.m. and remind you what it means to truly live. 2 years later, Dr. Sarah Reed, she'd kept her name professionally but taken as socially, sat in the same coffee shop where she and Marcus had first met as non-patient and non-nurse. She was reviewing applications for the scholarship fund they'd established together. Providing financial support for nurses who wanted to volunteer with organizations like Doctors Without Borders but couldn't afford to take the time off work. Marcus slid into the seat across from her, setting down a cup of coffee made exactly how she liked it. How's it looking? He asked, nodding at the applications. Good, Sarah said, smiling. Really good. We're going to be able to send 6 nurses this year. That's amazing. Marcus paused. So, I have news. The firm offered me the Sudan project. Sarah looked up sharply. The sustainable housing project for the refugee settlement? That's the one. It would be 2 years on site, coordinating the design and construction. Marcus took her hand. I know we just got settled here, I know we were talking about starting a family soon, but you have to do it, Sarah finished. It's exactly the kind of work you've always wanted to do. We both have to do it, Marcus corrected. There's a medical clinic component to the project. They need someone to help set it up and train local healthcare workers. I already talked to them about you. Sarah felt her heart swell. So we'd go together? We'd go together.